two online ones. The two
Sorry,
online.
just so folks
Okay.
know, we're recording just in case there's some folks who need to see this presentation in advance of the meeting. So just wanted to give people a notice of that.
So and there was an online survey as well, and in all those 7 forms of it, similar questions, the same questions basically were asked. And we also started the process at the annual meeting in Brockville with table group conversations, and particularly the one that was imagining what we thought the church would be in 10 years' time, and then what did we have to do in the next 2 or 3 years to make that happen. And so, as the Setting Our Sights team, we assembled all that information and then gathered to discern what we'd heard. But the structure for all of that had to do came about from the General Council strategic plan. And so I don't know if folks have the report in front of them. Have you read the report? I think I'll share the screen at least with the diagram so that people can see it. And Eric is going to talk a little bit about the fish.
Yes, the fish, the infamous fish. We realize, of course, that as we need to sort of organize our work and our thinking about the kinds of things that we need to do, this fish sort of provides a bit of a guidepost under which certain types of activities might fall. Now, when you're preparing a strategic plan, it doesn't necessarily mean that something that falls into growth doesn't also fall into common good, or that something that might be a leadership thing might also have a role in justice. There's no question that this is meant to be a flexible structure. But of course, as you're preparing a strategic plan, the General Council one is focused on the kinds of things that General Council does. And so it's appropriate to its level of or its particular role and responsibility in the governance of the church. Whereas at the regional council level, we're going to see different kinds of activities under each of these categories because it's appropriate to what the regional council does. And the key areas of this of the fish, the key categories of work, or the umbrellas under which various pieces of work will be doing, falls under these areas that you see before you. And growth, you'll notice, is at the head of the fish. And it's done at the head of the fish because the idea is that we are leading through growth, that we are thinking about growth in the church as the leading way through which we see all the rest. It's the head that sees, it's the head that has the mouth that is consuming, it is the head that is driving everything else in the body. And that is a really key piece. Now, when we talk about growth, it's hard sometimes for us to think about growth because we're focused quite a bit on the decline in the church. And that tends to be the area that we get a bit focused on. And the idea is that by setting our focus through a growth lens, we're trying to break that cycle. It doesn't necessarily mean that from moment to moment we're going to suddenly, be opening a church every single week, but it does allow us to sort of think about the rest of this through this lens. And there are 3 key components of that growth piece. One is renew. How do we renew and strengthen existing communities of faith? The second is create. Where are the gaps where we can create new ministries, new communities of faith that are answering a need that is current in society that we don't do in any other place? And invite. How do we speak to the general public about what it is that we want them to find if they are to participate in the United Church's activities and our ministries? So those are the areas within growth that we've been really thinking about. Now, the other pieces are around justice and climate. Justice around Indigenous justice, around racial justice, around LGBTQ justice, around housing issues, around guaranteed livable income. I mean, there are a lot of justice issues that stem from our ministries, for which we are passionate about. And so, what are the pieces that the regional council should take on in light of justice? And on the climate side, it's not only taking on the issue, but it's also doing something about it, right? What are the actual practical things we can do to lower our carbon footprint, for example? And so those components are key to the fish. They're intended to be at that in the gills, if you will, of the fish, where some oxygen comes into the fish. The fish is oxygenated by the gills. And then at the heart, you see leadership. And leadership is around what kind of leadership, lay leadership, what kind of ordained leadership, what kind of leadership does the church need to be able to live into a stance that is a growth stance, one that is a leadership that responds to the evolution and the existence of what the world around us is saying, and how God is speaking through that. So leadership is really at the heart of the fish. The Indigenous Pathways piece is the remit piece, which of course the church continues to work on until the remit takes its end at the end of March. So it's about making sure that our Indigenous church is able to find pathways to its governance. And then the common good is the tail, which is driving. It's the motor of the fish. And the common good here isn't the common good of society. We're talking here, because it's a strategic plan for the church, about the common good of the church itself. And so the common good here might be ways that we become more efficient, ways that we work together on things that we might otherwise have had to do separately. All of the common good pieces that kind of nourish us and help reduce some of the barriers and the challenges that we might have to living into a church that is focused on growth. And so that's really why these categories have been chosen. And as I say, some of these categories are interchangeable because of the ways that particular activities kind of touch on 2 or 3 of them. But we've chosen a category for these to help us sort of understand this in its broader sense, but understanding, of course, that nothing fits uniquely in one category of work. So hopefully that's a helpful starting point for what you're about to see.
Okay, does anybody have any questions about that diagram, or I mean, we'll get more into the categories in a few minutes, but I can only see 3 people at the moment, so I don't know if there's questions or not. But okay, so I think what we'll do, I think, is go through. We'll do 3 of the areas. So we'll do growth, justice, and climate, and then we're just briefly introduce what we're saying about those, and then we're going to go into a breakout rooms to kind of have some conversation about that, see if there's questions, where the whatever the responses are to the suggestions, to the activity streams, and to the outcomes or activities that are mentioned under each. And then we'll come back and have some response, and we'll do that another round with leadership and common good. So with growth, I think, Eric, if you want to just say a little bit more about the growth animator.
Yeah, so the General Council, to live into this commitment around leading through growth, has agreed to hire growth animators across the country. And these growth animators are there in their job descriptions. The idea here is that they would help to seed new communities of faith and help to strengthen existing communities of faith alongside of regional councils. Our new growth animator's name is Tori Mullen, and Tori will be beginning in January 2024 to work with our region, as well as the East Central Ontario region and the Nagunhaga region, to be a support person for the areas of growth to which we are committing to. Understanding that this isn't obviously our only support around this work, but I do want to sort of highlight that we get a little bit of additional support from the General Council office on this front starting in January.
Okay, so as we so the report in each of the 6 categories has the format of just briefly in some point forms what we heard folks saying about these categories. Then we talked about what is God calling us, what is God saying to us, and then activity streams, and then under various activity streams are some outcomes, measurable hopefully measurable in a sense of goals that we will know whether we are doing that, how we can know that we're accomplishing that activity stream. And so under growth, we have 5 activity streams. So I've just put on the PowerPoint the 5, not the measurable outcomes. So if you're following along with your report, that would be helpful. And the first activity stream is the Fertile Soil Project. And Eric, you may as well just keep talking about what that is.
So the Fertile Soil Project is we're one of 2 regions that's piloting this project with the General Council Office. The General Council Office has a mapping specialist, GIS specialist, who is able to engage in adding layers of data and information over top of the map of our region. And it's not just statistics from the census data, it's data from all sorts of different sources that we can find, including sociographic data, which is like, you know, what kinds of people, like in this particular area, do these people like to go see movies? In this particular area, how often do they go out to restaurants? You know, like it's literally like very detailed data upon which we can add all sorts of different filters and layers to it so that we can identify areas where there may be gaps in ministry or areas that we can sort of interject with from a growth perspective. So we're the pilot region along with a Western Canada region that not Prairie to Pine, but the one next to it, whose name I can't remember, but they do sort of Northern Alberta and
Northern Alberta, yeah. So.
and the Northwest Territories. So yeah, so we're going to be trying that project out over the next little bit.
Okay, so the other activity streams in growth, one thing we heard was that we're not very comfortable in engaging in invitational conversation, and so thought we needed to have some events and build some confidence and experience in being invitational. One of the things that's been happening in the region over the last year and a half, couple of years, has been work with communities of faith doing visioning processes, and that's been well received and mentioned frequently in the consultation process, and so that we wanted to continue to offer that, find ways that the region can support that and facilitate that. One of the things that came up many times in the consultation is the expansion of the term from congregation to community of faith. And what else can a community of faith look like? And so we thought that it would be helpful to provide some models of what other forms of organization and gathering can be communities of faith. And this also happens to be one of the activity streams of the East Central Ontario strategic plan. And so we thought we may as well not do it. We may as well work with them to work on this, not each do it. And then hopefully one of the things that would come out of that would be some communities of faith that are currently either are struggling to survive or figure their only choice is that or closure, can maybe find a different way of being a community of faith. And then the 5th activity stream would be the goal of creating 10 communities of faith, new communities of faith within our region. And that, again, affects the decision that, or the models that we'll outline, that they won't all be what we would call a traditional congregation necessarily. So those are the activity streams in the growth category. And we'll just quickly go to justice. We're proposing 4 activity streams here. And again, we heard that there's quite a bit of work going on, and there's some issues that we wanted some more attention to. And so one activity stream would be to ask our existing networks, a lot of which are dealing with justice issues. There's a housing network, there's a refugee network, there's a relations network, and maybe others, and just to help them to determine what their goals are and their work for the next couple of years. We also, racial justice was thing we heard, the need to continue to work on that. And so we are wanting to establish a racial justice leadership team within the region. So this is a little different governance structure than the network, but it's a leadership team similar to how affirming, because we've set that as one of our priorities as a region. The affirming group is a leadership team. And again, there would be certain activities that leadership team would be, we'd encourage them to do and help us do. One of the things we heard quite a bit about was some of the rural realities and some of the justice issues in rural communities. And so one of the things we became aware of, and it sounds like this group met today, Rural Ministry Network, which is a group across the country. But we thought as a region, we would develop a stronger connection, and maybe out of that would develop some more network within our region. And in particular, issues would be family farm, some internet stuff, and other things that are happening in rural communities. And just had some ideas around increasing our visibility and identity in the justice landscape of the region by having ways that we can participate and be visible in various things that happen in the community.
Can I just interrupt you for a second, please?
Sure.
It's Dave Clemens. I'm monitoring the chat sessions.
Okay.
There are a couple of questions here that precede this. I should have maybe jumped in sooner. But Glenn Tunnock asked, how will communities of faith be chosen to participate in the facilitation process in 2024?
I think it's my sense of that is that it's been as communities have identified the need and asked for help, the response, that's how they've been responded to. There's not a choosing of them. They've come forth themselves.
And from Phyllis McCrae, in trying to create 10 new communities of faith, do we count existing traditional congregations who reinvent themselves as a new model of a community of faith?
I don't think so. That's why we're saying one of the goals is to have 10 or the 10 shift from the current way into another form of being that's not closure. So I think that's where that category I think we would cover.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So and then we'll go to climate, and then we're going to go into groups to again, what we heard is it's an urgent, climate change is an urgent reality to be addressed in our world. But we also heard lots of stories of how communities of faith are responding with action. And so we want to continue that to happen. And so the two activity streams are to have at least 10% of communities of faith participate in Faithful Footprints programs. And our own, the work of the region itself in terms of meetings and all kinds of other work that we do, we try to reduce our carbon footprint by 20% in the 2024-2026 time period, recognizing that we need some period of time to set a benchmark to know how much then we've reduced it. So that's why it's over a little longer period than some of the rest of this plan. So those are the activity streams, the details more in the report. I think I'm gonna stop sharing and move us into some breakout rooms. I think I'll go with 3. Does that make sense, or 4? Anyway, 3, I think. So it's going to take me a minute to do this because I have to make sure that some people are
Yeah, make sure that some of the team members are in each
team
group.
are in each group. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe we should just check if there are any other questions of clarification before we go into
good idea.
into groups.
Do you have any particular questions we want us to discuss in these groups? Any particular
I think it's just a response to the
to the whole
report,
thing?
and if you have any
Okay.
questions, or if there's anything that we can improve for clarity on the report, that would be great.
Okay.
Oh, I had one
Paul?
which I typed up, but I didn't get it in the right box to get to you or to Jim. My question was, when you're looking at communities of faith, the United Church operational plan breaks out that 100 into about 7 different categories with sort of best guess numbers by each category. If we're going to work on some of the models, is somebody going to work on which of the 7 or 8 different models the operational plan has outlined might work best for Eeyore to be working with them to model or remodel or refine?
My sense is we're trying to leave it a little bit more flexible at the regional level because we're dealing with a much smaller number.
Okay.
And so I don't think we want to try to replicate the 7 different pieces within a
No,
group
I
of
was
10.
thinking you'd pick 1 or 2, Eric, maybe.
Yeah, but also what's interesting to me is that we already have 4 identified communities of faith that have an interest in becoming and in emerging.
Okay.
And so part of it is that we might need to sort of help make room for what's already emerging rather than going in and trying to, proactively create something. It might actually be both reactive and proactive depending on how we go. So I think part of this is really to sort of give some flexibility to what that might look like, but understanding that our overall goal would be 10.
Eric, would these 4 communities, instead of each of them closing, get together and form one church, one community of faith? Is that what their goal is?
Well, it depends, right? Because, for example, one of the identified communities of faith that is emerging, that has an interest in establishing itself, is a Swahili-speaking community of faith.
Oh, okay.
And most of their folks obviously would be in downtown or spread out throughout the geography of Ottawa. So if a church is closing in a rural area that's quite far out, it wouldn't make sense for them to be doing that kind of connection. But those are the kinds of things, obviously, we'd be looking for, is opportunities to sort of help build on existing ministries as well, and creating, hopefully, partnerships in having 2 communities of faith, for example, in one congregation. That would be the kind of thing that could very well work in some cases and not in others.
I was going to save one till the end, but I'd like to just table it now, not look for an answer, but have people think about it as the meeting goes on. But one of the things that struck me when I saw the second motion, which was to close down the committee that did such a good job on this report, was a lot of these questions are going to come up over the next year or 2 as we move to implementation. Would it not make sense to either keep this committee in place or something like it that almost had an oversight role against the strategic plan, so that people could focus their questions as we move ahead, or how, what's working, what isn't working, to just disassemble? I guess you're expecting staff or somebody then to pick up all of the analysis and reporting on it. And I just thought, maybe, boy, if that little committee of 6 would volunteer a day or 2 a quarter to sort of keep an eye on what's working out of the strategic plan, that to me would have tremendous benefit in achievement. So just something for people to think about as the meeting goes on.
Okay, we'll talk at some point near the end about what we're suggesting as to how the plan will be implemented.
Okay.
Cindy, did you have something you wanted to say before we go into group?
I just wanted to ask, and perhaps I missed it, my apologies if I did. What time frame are we breaking out for?
So 15 minutes?
Okay. Just, it helps to facilitate the conversation.
Okay, so
thank you.
I'm about to put you in groups, but I just need to tell David Clemens, for some reason you're not in the list, and because I think you're a host and I'm not in the list. So David, if you can go to room 1. Okay.
I didn't
And I'll
know I
go to-
was a host.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's what it says on my list.
No, okay.
And I'll go to room 2. Okay.
Okay.
So have fun, and I'll give you a minute warning.
And
when
just a
you're-
reminder that we're going to talk about the first 3 areas that we've already
Yes, first
presented,
3
not
areas. Yeah.
not the whole thing yet.
Yeah, so growth, justice, and climate. Okay.
There we go. Oh, everybody's muted. What's going on?
I think that happens automatically when we.
Oh, does it? Oh, okay.
So David, do you, since the 2 of us are, I think, the representatives of the committee on this group, do you want to lead the discussion, or would you like me to?
Oh, well, let's do it jointly. Let's see who falls in our face first.
Sure.
Well, I could probably at least start off here. As you heard, this has been a game changer experience for me, to be quite honest. And I actually kind of dreaded what we were going into until we got into it, and I was so surprised at how much information we were able to get. And it was really tough for us to come down to to sort of solidify all of this into some few words, because there were a lot of very voluminous words that have been spoken on this thing. And we're talking here about, of course, the first 3. And is there any comments on growth right now? We talked about growth being renewal, creation, and invitation. What did you see anything there that piqued your interest? Something that just didn't seem to sit right, or is there something that's missing? Diane, I see you up there.
Yeah, I think Norma's got her hand up.
Oh, Norma. Okay, go. Sorry.
When we first talked at the meeting in Brockville and I saw growth, I thought, oh no, because for years and years, people seem to think if we have seats in the pews on Sunday, that was the point of church. And that's over exaggerating, I realize. But in seeing the discussions over the type of growth and the intent, I feel really encouraged.
Great. Other thoughts from folks around growth? Liz?
Hi, I'm just in the report where you say there's possibilities for immigrant communities wanting connection to the United Church, which is a little bit what you were talking about with this emerging community. So what kind of connections are you going to have with the intercultural ministry work that's being done at National, or is it really being done?
Yeah, so there are a lot of connections that are currently underway. In fact, the example that I raised, one of the these are largely Methodists coming from Africa who are looking for their natural home, right? And the United Church is that home for them in Canada. And so in that particular case, the National Church has chosen somebody who can be a sort of a lead person to sort of help shape that community to start with, who would be in the admissions process. So the idea is that they're kind of putting together both the admissions process, the new community, helping to shape that in a way that's kind of appropriate. There are currently 280 admittance people who have applied for admission to the United Church of Canada and who have not found work. So there's a big pool of people from which we can count, and a lot of them have church planting experience. So there's a great opportunity there to take what's going on at the Office of Vocation nationally and try to match that with the kind of possibilities that we might have within our region. So yeah, there is definitely quite a bit of conversation about that. But there's also a piece around the intercultural thing that I want to highlight, which is we also need to provide a lot of newcomers a sort of a safe space culturally where it is what they're familiar with. And so when we try to sort of mush them in with traditional churches in Canada, it doesn't always work that well. And so that's kind of why I think the idea of having like two communities of faith within a congregation where there's ability to do some crossover and some connection, but at the same time that there's also sort of a sanctuary of culture for those folks is one of the key ways that we've been learning how to do church planting in that way, which is helpful.
Thanks.
Nancy, I'm not sure if your hand is up or if you or if it's just your fingers in front of the camera. And of course you're muted, so we can't hear you, but I see Jay also raised his hand, so. Oh, there you go, Nancy.
Yeah. I'm part of a small community and it's just the one United Church here. And we need lots of creative ideas about ways in which we can grow, because long timers, you know, they're looking backwards, newcomers, relatively newcomers, like 20 years or so, are open to, you know, new and different things to do. So it's a challenge to keep us all together and do things that are meaningful for both ages of people, or length of time here. We're all old people, but.
Do you think that the idea of sharing some different models of ministry might be helpful and inspiring to those folks?
Well, I would be very interested in, you know, exploring that. That's for sure.
Okay.
I'm open to all kinds of things. So.
Great.
Feeling lonely.
Nancy, if I could ask, where are you from?
Almont, Ontario.
Oh, good. Well, just up the road from me there. Yeah, it's interesting what you're saying. I think it would be really something just to get together, maybe with some of the other communities of faith in your area, like down in Pakenham. And Cedar Hill, or maybe over to TSA and Renfrew, just to sit down and have chats with them.
David, you're moving into the other areas of the plan. Hold on.
Right. Oh, damn.
Don't
okay,
rush.
anyway.
Don't rush.
No, I'm just saying that you know, I think we were looking at short-term and long-term things. I think this would be one of the ones that could be a very interesting and fun short-term look at that. But I'll stop, Eric. I'll stop. I'm sorry. That's what you get for bringing me into this now.
There you go. Jay, I had noticed your hand up, not your virtual hand, but your real hand up earlier than Diane. So I'm going to suggest that maybe we go to you first.
Okay. My apologies, Diane.
No problem.
In the fertile soil project, you talk about creating the different I suppose you could say interests and strengths of an area. And I was wondering how those areas are defined. Is that by community of faith, or is it by some geographical area? Or
the beauty of technology is you can choose what kind of scale you want to use, right? So if you want to say within a certain geography of a particular community of faith, you can do that. If you want to say where are the communities that have grown by at least 10% in the last 10 years, you can look at it from that perspective. If you want just the people who had fish for dinner last week, you could probably come down to that level of detail. Like it is really quite, you can cut and slice it however you want, really. If the data's out there, it can be mapped.
So I guess the question is, who's you?
Well, that's the idea. So the general council will come forward with some of their normal filters and data, and they'll say what kind of data would be useful as the regional council and as the executive is thinking about growth. What are the kinds of things that could be useful for you to put on a map? And so then they would go off and apply that and give us the maps, right? So it really is a back and forth thing between the regional council and the general council about the kind of data that we might want to map. Maybe some of it's about food insecurity and to determine what kind of ministry we might want to do around that. Maybe it's about, maybe it's about isolation. And there are certain qualities that we might want to apply for that. So it really is, it's a flexible tool. And between the regional council and the general council, we'll be modeling a whole bunch of different things.
So from a pastoral charge, we're not going to be involved in the planning.
Oh, I hope that our pastoral charges will be involved in that.
How?
So if your pastoral charge says, for example, that you're finding that you have a ministry that is really focused on music, right? That is a specialty that you're particular, and you want to know, is that something that there's a big interest in our region? Well, you can find that out, and we can provide all of the layers of data and the mapping to our individual communities of faith to say, here's what we have learned about your neighborhood that might be useful to you as you think about ministry in your neck of the woods.
Okay, that makes it a little clearer for me. Thanks.
Sure. Diane?
I'm working with multi-faith housing, and about 5 years ago now, I guess, we opened Veterans House in Ottawa, and 40 residents lived there. And in our initial discussions, we'd always thought that we would offer worship services there. And it's never got off the ground, but I think we and they are at a stage where we might look at that again. And it would have to be a very unique ministry, I would say. And we would call on military chaplains to offer leadership, because it's really important that people would serve the veterans there who really know their lifestyle and experience and all that kind of thing. So I think there's potential for a community of faith developing there, but it might be interdenominational, let's say, but it might be multi-faith. It could be multi-faith as well. But I think the United Church might offer some leadership in developing that. And we might look for some resources just to get it off the ground. And there's no way that we could ever, I don't foresee, hiring a full-time clergy person, but I think we could get some kind of coordinating leadership, and then maybe volunteers or somehow have people come in on a weekly or monthly basis to offer some just support. Like I don't foresee it being a traditional church in the sense of, what we think of as church, but I think it could be a very important ministry.
Diane, you might want to talk to the chaplain over at the Pearly Health Center. I work over there with her on pastoral care, and she brought me in basically to speak to vets. And there's a few of us around as well on the lay side who are ex-military. Who could probably help out there. But give her a call, Jessie. Jessie Stevenson, who she's the chaplain over at the Pearly, and she probably gave you some really good insights. I do ecumenical services over there as well. So
this is exactly the kind of thing, right? That we're
that's a great idea.
We're trying to find like the innovative pieces. One of the things that we need to do from a growth perspective is to undo our understanding that you have to have a church building and you have to meet on Sundays. Like that is that's a basic kind of thing that we assume when we hear community of faith, that it has to have those things. And it's like, well, does it really? Like it's like that doesn't necessarily have to be true. Right?
Have you dealt with the Bikers Church? I had a run, not a run in, but I had got a call to do a wedding service for a couple who were their father was dying of cancer like within days. And I walked into the hospital and all I saw were these black jackets, long hair. And I thought, what the heck is this? And this one fellow comes up to me and he says, I'm Pastor so-and-so of the Bikers Church, and we're so happy to see you. I thought, talk about a community of faith and one that's not bound by four walls.
Any other thoughts on this, Elizabeth? Any Elizabeth, Kathy? We haven't heard from the two of you yet.
No.
Sandra?
Well, I was thinking part of what in talking about growth, part of what we need to do is talk about the grief of leaving behind a way of doing things that has served us well for centuries, or at least 1 century. And now we're moving into another era where things are going to be different. And I think sometimes we're trying to do the new thing, but we haven't let go of the old thing yet. So I think that's an essential part of talking about growth. I know I did a sermon series on the fish diagram this summer. And when I talked about growth, people said to me, well, what do we have to do for church growth? And I said, we know what we have to do. We're just more comfortable doing it the way we've always done it. So.
And part of it's respecting traditional ministry while we're creating something new, because we did focus groups with young gay men about what appeals to them about going to church. And for them, going to a very traditional service is actually what's exciting to them, because it normalizes their relationship, right? It gives them an opportunity to be there and to feel that they're integrated in that context. So it's not like we have to throw out traditional services to be relevant, right?
And isn't that the way it was in the first century church?
Kathy or Sandra, anything that you wanted to throw in before we get thrown back into the main group?
Go ahead. I guess all I wanted to throw in is that I didn't get to any of these meetings, and I was supposed to be in Perth, but we ended up in COVID in our house. And so basically, but Eric, thank you for going over that fish again, because all of a sudden it ignited energy again around how in our area that I see that there is definitely potential in what's been happening. And it just reconfirms that, yes, we need to hang on to some of those wonderful things from our past, but how letting our young people, letting our individuals that are new to the communities, we've just had like 8 new people come to church in the last month. And it's just, we have just raised a different way of presenting that. And I think that just says, yes, we're in a changing mode and transformation to whatever we're supposed to be. So.
And in those words, that's probably the last we're going to hear, unless you want to say something in 7 seconds, Eric.
Or Sandra, actually.
I'll just look forward to partnerships that
Okay, thank you for that. It was probably 15 minutes goes by quicker than when you say 15 minutes. So I think it'd be helpful to hear briefly if there's some points, not the whole thing of what groups talked about, but if there was some points that we need to hear and particularly need to hear as we prepare to go to Saturday, where for the meeting where this will be put on the floor for hopefully approval. So group one, was there anything that came out of that? That was the group that Cindy and David were in.
No, I was in group 3.
Oh, okay. Sorry, yeah, sorry. That was the group
Eric
Eric and David were in. Okay.
I just found that it was incredibly animated, and I don't think we're going to have any problem finding people who want to come in and participate in making this happen.
Yeah, the one thing that came up was a caution around making sure that our growth doesn't ignore the grief of the loss as well. So being able to find that balance between those things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else from that group? Okay, group 2, that was the group Liz and I were in. And I think a lot of conversation about growth, but also quite a bit of conversation about how this is all going to get implemented, and a priority. And have we, within this report, are we naming priorities, and how will that be monitored as to how we're dealing with that? And I realize that's not something we've mentioned in the report, so maybe we'll say, well, there's a slide about that, but we'll in the presentation later, but I think we need to strengthen that a little bit. But one of the things on Saturday that and we could do that tonight too in a different way, would be that as people talk about this, if there's something, give an opportunity, if there's something that you're really excited about, really want to work on, a way of identifying that so we don't get that lost. So if you really want to work on this definition of communities of faith, we need to know that, so that we're not, because the implementation, we don't have months to get this going. We need to get this going as quickly as possible. So, okay, group 3.
Just before you go, Paul, one other thing from our group. The question was, Rose, are the resources there for assisting communities of faith?
Yeah, okay.
So for group 3, one of the biggest pieces was about talking around communication and making sure that there's lots of space within this process, within this strategic plan, for making sure that people are informed, that there are communities and pockets of communities that are either without clergy or even with clergy, that they're not getting the information. And I mean, that's not a newsflash for anybody in the church. It's been an ongoing problem, but this is being seen as an opportunity to make sure we actually address that in order for anything else to follow. There was another piece that came up about, and we're thinking this will be more into the common good area, but that we talk a lot about accessibility and not about disability. And sometimes that makes it difficult for people, which are in fact the largest vulnerable sector in society. So that's to really be paying attention to that. And also, of course, the tracking of, how we're going to do that, which kind of feeds into what Ron was speaking about earlier, before we got sent into our groups. And the last piece was just, it was sort of pointed out that the growth area seems to be too big and the justice and environment too small. So that was what came out of our group discussions. And if anybody else in group 3 thinks I've missed something, please do say it now. Oh, and timing, just how quickly can we get things moving? Because some churches simply don't have 10 years.
Okay. So we're going to do this again with the other 3, or the other 2, well, Indigenous Pathways is part of that, but the other categories. And so I'll see if I can find my PowerPoint presentation again. Okay, so leadership. This is probably one area where we heard a lot about. We heard a lot, and we heard a lot of weariness. We heard a lot of isolation. We heard a lot of need for connection, more resources, things like that, and how much leadership has changed and is changing in terms of what's needed and from various contexts. So there's 4 activity streams in here, but there's quite a bit in them. And so the first is support and encouragement for ministry personnel. And under this, there are various ideas. And again, most of these ideas came out of consultations, and we rather than recommending one or the other, we're just saying we need to create an environment where some of these ideas are tested and see which one has the momentum to keep going. So things like encouraging and promoting various initiatives that are already happening around having ministry personnel gather for retreats, lunch gatherings, peer ministry groups, etc. Talked about planning in next year an initial multi-day retreat for ministry leadership. And part of the idea of this is one of the ideas was to involve lay worship leaders as well as ministry personnel, maybe overlapping some unique stuff. That's kind of the initial idea. Have some more conversation about forming an association of ministers. That was one of the ideas in the comprehensive review, and it's been picked up a couple of places, but not in all regions. And just there was a longing to gather for like retired ministers to gather, or candidates for ministry to gather, or various different categories, and just hold some of those meetings. And we realized that COVID has meant that we can't do some of that. That might just have been natural to do anyway, but we need to do some of that and be intentional about welcoming new ministry personnel into the region. Because sometimes we don't hear that there's a new person for months. Similarly, support and encouragement for lay leaders. And again, some of the ideas here: offer workshop for lay leadership roles. We do M&P committee workshops now, but maybe governance chairs, get them together to talk about various dynamics, or treasurers, or representatives to the regional council, or just various ways that people can be supported and know one another, learn to get to know each other and network themselves. Develop or make available resources to help with specific situations, realities. Continue to promote licensed lay worship leaders, and explore. This is one that really struck me from one of the consultations, was to explore the needs for leadership development of lay leaders for communities of faith that do not have ministry personnel for long periods of time. So it's kind of that sense of what else can help that lay leadership sustain and enable the life of the congregation. The Youth and Young Adult Committee was able to submit some of their plans, and so we worked that into the plan, and that's to support and build the capacity of youth and young adult ministry in the region. And again, through various ideas, including some of the things that we continue to do: Camp Awesome, work campus ministry, work on possibility of Rendezvous, a national event being held here in the region in 4 years' time. And then develop children's ministry. Because again, one of the things we heard a few different times was that there's not a lot of regional support for people who work in children's ministry, or to how we can work together on that, or in that whole area. So those are kind of the activity streams for leadership. Indigenous pathways. Again, in the strategic plan, this is something that's being worked out. The Indigenous Church is determining its relationship. The settler church's role is the remit. And we also think that Indigenous justice issues will be part of the justice activity streams. So that's how we're covering that part of the fish. And then common good. Again, this is one of the ones where there was a lot of needs and ideas and hopes expressed. And one of those is to develop a model for congregational support by the May 2024 meeting. So part of this, what this means is that there was some lament that we don't have pastoral oversight role the way we used to. There was some sense that we don't hear when churches are closing, we don't know they're in trouble until they've come to say they're selling their building, that sort of stuff. So we need to develop some model that helps resource to congregations with self-assessment, because one of the parts of the new model was congregationals doing self-assessments each year. And in this region, we haven't really found the tool to help that to happen effectively. And the whole pastoral charge supervision thing is becoming what was often for a short period of time is now often a long period of time. And so what are the best ways of doing that sort of work? So rather than propose a model now, we said that's an area that needs further work. And so appoint a working group to propose a model to the 2024 annual meeting. Also talked about an activity stream of developing an inventory of congregational specialties. Like, so if a congregation is really good with children's programming or really good with various things, that we know that about each other and don't get jealous or compete with each other, but support those initiatives and be able to direct people who need particular things or help the specialties grow some of those areas in other places. But we just need to know the inventory of that. And then there's a couple of things about gathering together, because one of the really clear things we heard in this consultation, even by having the consultations themselves, was people were saying, oh, it's so good to get together across from multiple pastoral charges. And so we had some ideas for gathering for inspiration and for deepening spirituality. One of those is to work towards holding an inspirational worship event for the 100th anniversary of the church in 2025. But also encourage, and this is one of those places where clusters come in. Again, clusters is one of the concepts in the model of that we implemented in 2019 when the regional council came into being, and the cluster model hasn't there's not a lot of the examples of that happening, but just encourage that. And two of the ways that cluster can really come together is to gather for worship and inspirational stuff, as well as for learning and educational things. Those would be two ways that clusters might be able to find ways to gather. And in terms of gathering for learning and encouragement, is that one of the things we're recommending is that maybe one of the meetings is one of the 3 meetings would be that we would gather in sub gatherings, somewhat geographic, but also by interest. Maybe if there was a meeting about youth ministry, or there were lots of ideas named in the consultation process where people would just like to get together and explore it more. What it means to be trauma response in midst of trauma, medical assistance in dying. There were more compassionate stuff around the whole dying and end of life processes. Like there were, and so we could have some special meetings where not everybody might not, we'd have could be different things that people could choose to go to. Find ways to expand the communication work of the region, continuing to evaluate the tools we have and how we're reaching out to people, because again, we've heard tonight some of the things about not hearing anything about the consultation process. We heard various things about that, and so that means strengthening the roles of the people on the regional council to help communicate into communities of faith what's happening. And then the sixth one would be to explore the ways that the administrative work of congregations might be able to be shared. So there was some imagining around maybe sharing bookkeeper, or doing financial reviews, coordinating those and having those done by each other, a model that Ottawa Presbytery used a few years ago, and try to figure out how we could do that. So that sort of stuff, so that we're not, we're helping one another. So I think those are the activity streams for leadership, particularly leadership and common good. And so are there any questions kind of for clarification before we go back into groups to discuss those? Okay, so let's say 15 minutes again, and then we'll come back at 8:28. Okay.
Here we are. Well, welcome. Who's going to take leadership on this one?
Whatever it is, we're going to give Sandra the first word.
Oh boy.
When we interrupted you with the cutting of the meeting there, that was terrible.
No worries. I'll say more than I need to this time.
I've got a stopwatch going here, so I'll keep an eye on the time. I found this whole area very intriguing, the leadership one. I think that this is it seems to be a very good reaction to what I at least see as the reality when I go around to different churches. And some of the questions that I get asked when I go into them. And I am so excited to see that some of these initiatives are going to happen, particularly when it comes to the educational or awareness side, where we're bringing people together to talk with each other in different forms, either ministerial or lay. And of course, the suggestion of doing a joint ministerial and lay sessions would be really, I think, very helpful to those of us who are doing the lay leadership side of it.
Other reactions, thoughts about these areas around leadership and common good?
I think I agree with Dave that there is a strong interest to want to get together. And I can see that the research, is showing more events down the road, that there are going to be educational events and opportunities to gather. And I think indeed you have heard, this is what people do seem to want. And so I think people are encouraged that there are going to be opportunities to gather, to learning experiences and so forth.
Liz?
Yeah, I just thinking about, so children's ministry, what we're talking here is at the regional level, or are we talking individual congregations?
What's mostly being discussed here, I think, is sort of networking amongst those doing work with children already, or those who want to, so that they can learn from each other and build some skills and capabilities around that. We don't. Part of the issue is that there are some things that suit the regional council as a role, but offering a children's program across the region doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. So
Right.
It's really about how do we support what's happening in congregations and help network those, that I think is at the heart of this. Yeah.
So as we're trying to restart Sunday schools, this is what it's about, or Messy Church, or
Sunday schools,
or
Messy Church,
what-
yeah.
whatever kinds of things. No, I think that would be really helpful because that's where we're at.
Yep.
trying to do that. So in the first point, I mean, to me, so as you think about it, different models of delivering these kinds of programs would be really useful. And we're we don't have enough kids to purchase a curriculum. The United Church curriculum, the new one, is really expensive. So I think maybe the church needs to think about that. Like if they want to develop these wonderful curriculum, if we can't afford them or make it worthwhile for 10 kids, that's where we're all at. So what do? Do we use online things that may perhaps not be totally appropriate for our theology? Anyway, that's because that's where we're at. We've got a little group trying to do that at our church right now, and being able to connect with others who are doing, have already figured some of this out would be helpful. We used to have a Sunday school, but it's been a while. Thanks.
Well, and you were saying, Eric, earlier about gathering metrics on expertise and capabilities. I think that's a key, is if you know people that you can get a hold of, like we were talking about ministry at the in the interfaith housing or at Pearly. It was because people at that level got together and says, "Oh, what can we do about this?" And I think that from that leadership perspective, I think my only concern is hopefully people aren't going to sit back and wait for leadership to evolve this. That we are the leaders. We are the people. The congregations are the leaders. They're the people who should be out there working at this. I hope that people aren't going to sit back and wait for the people up at the top to come up with the programs. And I think that's what I get in when I look at the common good side, is the common good comes from the common groups. And I think that it's very important, especially when we're talking on that last point in common groups, or the common cause, is we already have examples of where there is one administrator for 3 churches in the rural areas. So we know that it can work. It's not, let's wait till we hear if it works. It is working.
Jay and then Elizabeth.
Guess I'm not muted. No. Okay.
Nope.
I thought maybe it was useful to share a little bit of what we're learning at our church, Knox. Our New Directions team wanted to target our children and youth, and one of the questions that we posed ourselves is, if we want to appeal to them, what are we going to offer them? What do we have to offer them? And we started to think about that, and we started to try to think away from the traditional things which are currently offered as part of Sunday school or youth group or whatever. And we came up with the notion of offering a night of electronic games, and having one of those traveling trucks come and put on a choice of electronic games for our group of communicants that are just coming out. So we thought about that, and we checked through all the different parts of the church organization to make sure that we could do it. And then we offered it to the kids. And I think that's the second point, is that we need to consult with them, because when we asked them, would you like something like this? They had a discussion and decided that no, they would really rather go bowling. So there's the little thing that I can share with you that happened to us this week.
Elizabeth.
Yeah, I was interested in the common good, and kind of the model that I started with in a rural presbytery a long time ago was that when there was something going on in one congregation, it was usually the neighboring charges that sent you know, like the minister in or somebody with somebody from presbytery to try and help people manage, whether it was a conflict or a pastoral relations vacancy or whatever. And it all happened quite naturally. Now we have so few full-time ministers in those isolated areas. It's harder and harder to draw on the resources of the pastoral church that's next to you. But I think what we've missed is, or we've developed maybe some competitiveness between congregations, between pastoral churches. So if we hear that oh, they have a really great forest church thing going on, instead of our people going to their forest church, we say to our minister, oh, you should do that. You should do forest church too. And we're doubling up instead of sharing our resources. So yeah, I would love to do kind of an inventory, or see an inventory of what it is our congregations do well, and letting other people know about it.
And it's also puts incredible pressure on every congregation to feel like they have to be great at everything. Like we're making it impossible to be a united church, because if you don't have the perfect music and Sunday school and Christian education and Bible study and this and that, it's like, why does everybody have to be good at this stuff? It's not suitable. It's not acceptable for us to put that as a condition to ministry in people's heads. So yeah, we do need to think about that carefully. Norma, Kathy, Diane? Other Kathy?
I don't really have anything to add, but I think at some point, would it be helpful to have some sort of a presentation or something on what does it mean to be a progressive church? I mean, we hear so much about evangelical and conservative congregations and them doing so well. And on one hand, we hear that the Broadview magazine is, one of the few last voices of the progressive side of Christianity. And for some people who are trying to establish, say, Sunday school or youth programs, and they look at resources, how do they think about this? How do they discern what is really appropriate? And would they know what it was when they saw it? So I think some help with that might be good.
We do have a problem in thinking that sometimes progressive equals removing Christ from the conversation.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's like, don't think that's actually what we're talking about. So, yeah. Norma, go ahead.
I'd make a comment about children and youth, because if you were a community church, basically a community church, nothing stands still. So you can go from having no kids in the congregation to having quite a few kids in the congregation. I've been in my congregation now for, I guess, close to 20 years. There were 3 kids in the Sunday school when I arrived. We went up to 45 at one point, and this past Sunday, I think we had 14 or something like that, which is phenomenal. It was also partly because it was the Sunday school had signed up to do coffee hour for us. So they were baking cookies. More kids turned out for baking cookies than for godly play, which actually I could highly recommend, except it's a lot of work. And that is, I think, a challenge for many congregations. Nothing comes with no effort. And if you want to have something that you can just not do any work and just open the page, and kids aren't going to, they have better things to do on a Sunday morning. It needs to engage the children. The children need to be part of it. I think that's really important. The other thing is our locations make us very different. And although I love Mackay because it is a community church. Quite a few of us walk to it, which is nice. But we are also, people come and people go. Some because the kids are now playing hockey or something like that. There is that as well. But many come because they've come to do a sabbatical at Ottawa U, or they're being posted overseas, or they're, and so you need to be extremely flexible, but also you need to expect to have people come in with different ideas, and you can't wait 2 years to incubate the idea if it's a good one, because they may not be here anymore to put some effort into it. And it's a challenge, but I think it's also a blessing. So it means that each personality of a congregation has its own challenges.
Well, I'm afraid to say, Norma, that you may be the last word.
Oh dear.
Well, we don't actually have the official 60-second warning yet from the center. Usually there's a
Oh,
little
okay.
pop-up from them about
Yeah,
that.
I just was watching my watch here.
Yeah, it is 28. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
But I'm wondering if Kathy Petrie might have something to add, since we haven't heard from you, Kathy.
Is there another Kathy?
Yeah, Kathy Petrie is in our room,
Where is
but
she?
she's
Oh,
muted.
yes, right.
She's muted, so I don't know if maybe she's just happy to lurk, which is fine.
I noticed at one point the other Kathy with a C and I were both battling a fly.
Well, we were.
We were
The same
on the
fly,
wall.
at least. Yeah.
There's the,
You mean you actually see the fly that's bothering?
I didn't see the fly. I saw you swatting it. I did the same thing shortly afterwards.
okay, we got the shutdown. So
And 42 seconds.
So in terms of reporting back, if for whatever reason David or I don't, share something that you think is an important insight, please don't hesitate to jump in and add it to the wrap up. So.
And we should drift off any second now.
Right.
Or not. Dooby 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 doo.
Okay, I think we're back. So again, hope the conversations were fruitful, and maybe we'll start with group 3 this time. Do you have something to summarize your conversation that bring back?
Sure. So, I mean, again, the tracking piece and the accessibility piece, but there was, again, a real drive to the back to basics of communication. In terms of not all communities of faith even have access to IT in any way, shape, or form. So we really have to be seriously looking at that across this country. We just don't have that everywhere. And so we are leaving out a whole swath of people. Also pointed out that it seems like a very ambitious plan with lots of moving parts, and that we need to have that core group of people to help make anything work, because it's not just about money or space, but very much about the number of people, whether we're looking at lack of clergy, lack of volunteers, lack of church leadership, whichever demographic that you're looking at. Also just sort of looking at the reality that we have climate down, but really it should be the environment in general, where climate is just one part. Those were the key points that came out of our session.
Okay, group 1.
Wow, it was very interesting. I think one of the parts of it was in response, I think, Cindy, to what you were saying, there are already activities out there that respond to some of those activity streams that we referred to in, particularly when it came to the common good. That there were people out looking at what other people are doing, sharing and just trying to discern where they were going in all of this. And certainly I think that there is, if nothing else, a will out there to get engaged.
And I just add that one of the issues that comes up is around competition, right? And the more we can do our best to undermine the sense that if that person's doing something, we also have to do it, and sort of reduce that kind of instinct within the church, and celebrate the things that each of us do well, and encourage folks to participate in that is a good thing. So.
Okay, group 2. Liz, you want to say something? Yeah.
No, that's you, Paul.
Okay.
No, I think I think one of the main things that we talked about was really, it came back to clusters again and people taking initiative, but using the tools that are out there already, the skill sets, there's so many of them. If they were able to get together in a group and support each other, whether it be, we've mentioned it before, different groups that could from each of the churches that could get together and really strengthen that, their bond and what's happening, so that they can share it together.
I think there was a conversation around just the need to more communication, and the ideas around having opportunities for people to connect, like council chairs. If council or board chairs could, had a regular opportunity where anybody who had a question could ask it, or something, some of those type forums, just to make it that the region be a resource to the congregations.
And quite a bit said about oversight, having oversight in place.
So, and again, concerns around how all this is going to get implemented. So, so I think that's a good place to go to now. I think I have a slide from PowerPoint on that, if I can remember how to get there. Okay. So this is already the PowerPoint for Saturday, because I had to submit it a week ahead. So this has something to do with implementation. So recommendations will become the work of the regional council, along with, and reminder that there's a lot of work in the regional council that this report has not mentioned. And so not that work won't continue. It's just that this is highlighted as some of the priorities and new directions to move into. So then these activity streams will be integrated into the work of the council, with implementation being a staff responsibility, and oversight and assessment being an executive and a council task. So that's kind of the initially, and the budget and staff resources will also reflect this strategy. So there's a budget being presented on Saturday as well, for next year, that offers some envelopes and some room for this work to happen. Again, it's hard to set a budget before we set the plan, but there's been conversation between the finance committee and the Setting Our Sights group around some of this, so that it's not a total surprise to them. So that's, Eric, do you want to say anything more about how you envision the implementation happening?
Yeah, I expect sort of the staff to come together to do sort of a very clear work plan and for each year, and what you'll get at each meeting, the spring and fall meetings, is a report back on where we're at. Did we meet our objectives? Did we not? Are our measurables accurate? Are we needing to make changes to our original strategies because of what we're learning? So the nice thing is that at each meeting, you're going to get a full report of where we're at on the strategic plan. based on the kind of measurables that we've got. But the executive really is intended to be the main body that is stewarding this from day to day on behalf of the regional council. But that is so in terms of who's taking responsibility to oversee this and make sure that things are happening, that it would be them. So.
That's the information, the outline of the strategic plan. I don't know if anybody has any other comments or questions before we wrap it up.
Barbara made a note here. She wanted to say thank you, Paul, for preparing your slides so early.
You mean not everybody got them in a week ahead when you told me that?
No, and I'm prepared to be a real meanie about this. I feel very strongly about having documents available in an accessible format appropriately ahead of time. And I will be very difficult to live with if people hand me something on the way up to speak. I think that is disrespectful to the members, and we are trying very hard to have accessible and readable documents. I might also, if I'm allowed a 60-second pitch, we are encouraging everyone to use headphones on Saturday. This is good for amplification. It is not only for interpretation, and we will be promoting that everyone should wear and use headsets.
Okay, Sandra has her hand up. Is that a question? Or...
Yes. Yes, it's a question. Is there going to be another stage at which we ask our questions, or is now a good time?
Now is a good time. Yeah.
Okay. I realize this fish image is something that was developed at the national level, the general council level, and that the regional level is utilizing the fish image. Was there ever the expectation that the individual local congregations and churches would adopt any of those pillars and that fish image as a lens as well when they do visioning?
I don't know. Peter, in your experience, has it been used? Eric, have you got a comment on that?
Maybe I'll let Peter sort of describe the visioning process, which I think is different than what we would normally do. But Peter, do you want to speak a little bit to that?
So yeah, I guess I will. I'll say as I anticipate wrapping up in my role after about 2 years, I will have worked with about 40 congregations across the region in various visioning processes, many of them from start to finish. And towards the end, I do introduce the fish. I introduce the call and vision of the United Church, and I invite that as a lens going forward as part of the continuing discernment that we ventured into, that I accompany these congregations through, to consider themselves as part of the whole, right? As the many parts that come together to be the United Church. And so, yeah, certainly in the work that I've been doing over my tenure, I absolutely have invited folks to consider themselves within the larger context of our denomination. And some find it very, very useful to do that as part of their own discernment. Absolutely. And I would, if I may, suggest that we continue doing that going forward.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Sort of related to that question, Sandra, I also think that the call that the church has adopted around deep spirituality, bold discipleship, and daring justice is, I think, an interesting question to ask ourselves at the congregational level. because that is, of course, the main place where people are received into the church. They don't come to a regional council meeting for their first experience of the church. And the question of, you know, how are we doing on those three fronts as a congregation, as a community of faith? You know, are we providing deep spirituality? Are people coming and experiencing a connection to the divine in a real way? Are people being transformed into bold disciples, right? Are we creating disciples? And what are we doing about that? And so there are many different ways that a congregation might choose to sort of engage in some of the national filters, if you will, that are being proposed. And the fish is one. I think the call and vision is another. But there are different ways to get there for sure.
Hey, anything else?
If I could speak, Paul.
Sure.
I think there's two words that have come out of tonight's session that has struck me. One is communication, and that is communicating ideas, communicating with each other as we move forward. And the other word is sharing resources, sharing experiences, sharing skill sets, sharing church buildings and so forth. And I think I'm encouraged by the fact that both those are at the front of our discussions, and I'm just hoping that we can carry forward. And I made the suggestion, a fairly simple suggestion, is you know, I've got a new network of friends, colleagues that I'm seeing in front of me, and just wondering if that list can be shared, because if we're starting to build on each other's skills and resources and so forth, it starts here. Thank you.
And yeah, I just say that we thank you for your participation. We as a group have coordinated this and facilitated it, but the work has been done by about 140 people attending consultations and submitting answers to survey questions, and there'd be more added to that number tonight in this conversation. And so remembering that we collectively are the regional council. And so we're the implementation and the carrying forth of this vision will not be a small group. It will be all of us involved in varying levels of engagement. So thank you for that. So I think we're wrap this up and just offer a blessing that we go into this night for rest, and that we continue to be the people that God calls us to be, the disciples of Christ. Amen. And I would